The first time it happened, Anna did not notice right away. The morning sun poured through the curtains, scattering a golden haze over the kitchen floor. Emma, her daughter, was at the small wooden table, her tiny fingers fiddling with a doll with faded pink clothes. Anna had just poured herself a cup of coffee and was listening to the hum of the city outside, the distant barking of a dog, the scraping of a neighbor's chair against the sidewalk. She turned around to hand Emma the sugar bowl, and then, in a blink, the chair was empty. The doll lay untouched on the floor, and Emma was gone. Anna froze. She called her name softly at first, then louder, her voice trembling. "Emma, honey, where are you?" The sound echoed against the walls of the apartment, and nothing answered back. The air felt thick, almost solid, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Anna's heart hammered in her chest. She checked the kitchen, the living room, the bathroom. Every corner, every closet, every drawer empty. Not a single trace of Emma remained. She ran to the front door, opened it, and peered down the hallway of their apartment building. The hall was quiet. The neighbors' doors were closed, the usual morning sounds absent. No footsteps, no voices, no sign that anyone had been there at all. It was as if Emma had never existed. Panic clawed at Anna's chest. She ran back to the living room, grabbed her phone, and called the building manager, the neighbors, anyone who might have seen her daughter. Everyone's response was the same: confusion, polite doubt, or irritation. "Your daughter? I have not seen her," said one neighbor. "Are you okay?" asked another. The tone suggested that Anna herself might be imagining it. The police were slower, bureaucratic in their disbelief. They listened politely as Anna described Emma's sudden disappearance. "Cameras?" they asked, but the building cameras, for some reason, showed nothing unusual. No one entering or leaving the apartment at that time. No signs of struggle, no footprints, no small body stepping quietly out the front door. Nothing. Anna's mind refused to accept the reality she faced. How could her daughter vanish and no one notice? How could someone or something take her and leave nothing behind? As the day passed, she grew desperate, checking every inch of the apartment repeatedly. Sometimes when she turned her head, she thought she saw a movement at the corner of her vision. A shadow flitting across the hall, a whisper of giggle carried in the breeze from the open window. But whenever she looked directly, there was nothing. Night came, and with it, a peculiar stillness. The city outside her window seemed muted, as if holding its breath along with her. Anna sat in the empty kitchen, clutching her coffee like a lifeline, trying to make sense of what had happened. She felt her own mind fraying under the pressure of the impossible. The next morning, the same strange quiet. Anna woke to find the doll from the previous day placed neatly on the table, untouched but slightly tilted, as if someone or something had been there. She called Emma's name again, softly this time, almost afraid of disturbing whatever invisible presence had been in the apartment. And then she noticed the chair. It had moved slightly, a subtle shift that had not been there before. For the first time, a terrifying thought crossed her mind. What if Emma had never existed? It seemed absurd, impossible, but the idea gnawed at her. Every neighbor denied ever seeing her daughter. Photos on her phone that she was certain had shown Emma now appeared empty. In some pictures, the blur of a small figure seemed to fade if she looked too closely. Anna began documenting everything meticulously, noting times, locations, the position of objects, and the faintest impressions in her memory of Emma. Every detail felt like a clue, every sound like a signal, and yet nothing concrete ever appeared. Days passed, though Anna could not measure them by ordinary means. She stopped noticing the sun's position or the sound of cars outside. The apartment had become a stage for subtle, ghostly signs, a drawer slightly ajar, a shadow shifting where no one should be, a whisper that died the moment she tried to hear it properly. Sometimes she would glance into mirrors and see Emma's reflection behind her, only for it to vanish when she turned. Her friends stopped calling. They stopped visiting. They began to look at her with that same polite disbelief, the kind that isolates someone slowly, cruelly. "You need rest," they said. "You're imagining things." But Anna could not rest. She could not sleep. She could only search. She searched in closets, under beds, behind furniture, in the apartment courtyard, and even outside in the empty streets below. Anna began keeping a journal of the inexplicable occurrences, each page filled with detailed observations. The chair moved, the doll tilted, the shadow flickering, the reflection fading. She wrote with the intensity of someone trying to anchor themselves to sanity. The apartment was both prison and theater, filled with invisible actors that haunted her relentlessly. Then came the small, almost imperceptible signs that Emma might be near. Sometimes a faint laugh, like wind through the cracks of the window. Sometimes the smell of her hair, sweet and familiar. A hair ribbon found on the kitchen counter, though Anna was certain she had never placed it there. These moments were fleeting, teasing, maddening. Anna tried to rationalize, tried to find any logical explanation. Perhaps she had been dreaming. Perhaps grief from a past loss had distorted her perception. Perhaps the stress of her life had fractured her mind. But rationality provided no comfort. Each night, she would wake to the feeling of someone watching, and each morning, the emptiness would greet her anew. By the end of the first week, Anna had transformed. Her hair hung in loose strands, her clothes were unkempt, her eyes darkened with sleepless nights. She moved with a frantic purpose, checking, observing, noting. The apartment seemed to pulse with a rhythm all its own, as if acknowledging her obsession. Anna was trapped in a liminal space between reality and illusion, and every sign, every tiny disturbance, pulled her deeper into her own mind. The thing that terrified her most was that no one else could see what she saw. Emma's absence was invisible. Her presence, when hinted at, was invisible. And gradually the terrifying possibility began to crystallize. Perhaps this had always been a construct of her imagination. Perhaps the entire disappearance, the subtle signals, the fleeting glimpses, were all of her own making. And yet, Anna could not stop. She could not ignore the traces, the whispers, the impossible signs. Somewhere in the apartment, somewhere in the air around her, something was there, or had been there, and it carried the essence of her daughter, intangible but undeniable. The first part of her journey ended in a kind of suspended horror. She was alone, caught between the invisible and the real, and the lines separating them were dissolving. The apartment, once a home, had become a labyrinth of perception, and Anna wandered it tirelessly, guided only by the faint echoes of Emma's presence. She would not rest. She could not rest. She had to find Emma. Or perhaps she had to prove to herself that Emma had ever existed at all. The next morning, Anna woke to the faint smell of something sweet, almost like vanilla, drifting from the hallway. She froze, listening. The apartment was silent, but her skin prickled with awareness, every nerve alert. She had smelled this scent before, always when she felt Emma's presence most strongly, always when the fleeting sense of the child's laughter had teased her. She got out of bed slowly, her bare feet pressing against the cold floorboards, and followed the scent. It led her to Emma's room. The door was closed, as it always was, yet somehow she felt it was open, inviting her in. She turned the handle and entered. The room looked unchanged, the small bed neatly made, the toys lined against the walls, the drawings pinned carefully above the desk. Nothing moved. Nothing was out of place. But the scent lingered, heavier now, as if lingering over some invisible child. Anna knelt on the floor, touching the bedspread lightly, as if her fingertips might reach what her eyes could not. She whispered Emma's name. Nothing. The room remained perfect and still, yet she could feel it, tiny vibrations under her skin, a heartbeat in the air. She rose slowly and walked to the window, peering out over the street below. The world carried on obliviously, people moving like shadows, buses rumbling past, dogs barking in the distance. Nothing acknowledged the absence of her daughter, and that invisibility was the most unbearable part. Anna began noticing more subtle anomalies. Chairs tilted slightly, toys shifted imperceptibly, drawings seemed to rearrange themselves on the walls. She would see these changes only when she was not looking directly, as if the apartment had a consciousness of its own, a mischievous, taunting awareness. And always, always, the faint scent of vanilla lingered, a ghostly tether to a child who did not exist. She tried to sleep that night, curling under the blankets with exhaustion pressing her down, but sleep eluded her. Every shadow seemed to move in the corners of her eyes. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep. She began speaking aloud to Emma, narrating every movement, every thought, every tiny sensation, as if the act of vocalizing would somehow conjure her daughter back into the room. By the third day, Anna's apartment had transformed into a shrine to a presence no one else acknowledged. Toys were arranged meticulously in patterns she could not explain. Chairs were positioned carefully, as if marking paths. Notes covered the desk, observations, diagrams, sketches of shadows, small symbols she felt compelled to draw. Her handwriting grew frantic, looping and jagged, the ink sometimes smudged by tears or trembling fingers. She did not know if the apartment had always been like this, or if her own actions had made it so. Anna ventured outside, for the first time in 2 days, and walked through the streets in a daze. Neighbors looked at her strangely, some with concern, others with irritation. No one mentioned Emma. No one saw her daughter. She stopped people, asking if they had seen a little girl, describing Emma in detail. Faces turned blank, eyes averted. She realized she was shouting into a void. Emma's disappearance was invisible, erased not just from space, but from collective memory. Back in the apartment, Anna began to question her own mind. Was she losing grip on reality? Perhaps, but the signs, the subtle movements, the scent, the fleeting vibrations of a child's presence were undeniable. No hallucination could leave objects shifted, chairs tilted, or faint shadows lingering in corners. Anna began recording everything with her phone, photographing the room multiple times each day, taking videos of the empty corridors, capturing what she hoped might be proof. But when she reviewed them, the images showed only a tidy apartment, still and ordinary. Her own documentation betrayed her, erasing every trace of Emma before anyone else could see it. Weeks passed, though Anna could not measure time. She stopped leaving the apartment entirely, consumed by the impossible task of finding Emma. She spoke to no one, ate little, slept less. The apartment became a living entity, feeding on her obsession. Every day brought new anomalies: a small chair slightly closer to the bed, the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway, shadows moving against the walls in ways that defied logic. Anna could feel Emma's presence everywhere and nowhere. The mirror became her enemy. She saw reflections that should not exist. A fleeting shape behind her shoulder, the suggestion of movement in the corner of the glass, the faintest echo of a small voice whispering her name. Sometimes she reached out, hoping to touch her daughter through the mirror's surface. Her hands met only cold glass, yet the sense of connection lingered, maddeningly real. One evening, Anna noticed a detail that changed everything. On Emma's bed, perfectly placed, was a small ribbon, identical to the one Emma always wore in her hair. It had not been there before. She picked it up carefully, turned it over in her hands. There was no dust, no fingerprints, nothing to suggest someone else had left it. The presence was unmistakable, yet entirely impossible. She whispered Emma's name, her voice cracking, desperate. A faint giggle responded, barely audible, yet it made her heart leap. From that moment, Anna's reality fractured completely. She began speaking to Emma as if she were physically present, arranging the toys, laying out clothes, reading bedtime stories to an empty room. Sometimes she thought Emma responded, small giggles or soft sighs that could vanish the instant she looked. She began leaving traces for her daughter, hoping to guide her back, not realizing she was trying to communicate with a presence that only existed in the gaps of perception. Her obsession became ritual. She would move through the apartment on a precise path each day, checking every corner, every object, every possible hiding place. Chairs, tables, toys, drawings, all became markers of her invisible daughter. She stopped trusting her own memory, writing down everything meticulously. Each journal entry grew longer, more frantic, as Anna attempted to capture the ungraspable, the essence of a child who could not be seen by anyone else. Neighbors and friends had stopped visiting entirely. Anna realized she existed in a bubble, a private universe defined by subtle disturbances and fleeting traces. The outside world was indifferent. Emma's absence remained invisible. The boundaries between reality and imagination blurred further each day, until Anna could no longer tell whether the footsteps she heard were real or a figment of her mind. And yet, she persisted. The scent of vanilla, the subtle vibrations, the faint shadows, they called to her relentlessly. Anna moved through the apartment like a ghost herself, searching, whispering, documenting. She was alone, and yet somehow, she was not. The apartment had become a mirror of her mind, a labyrinth where the invisible presence of Emma haunted every wall, every floorboard, every reflective surface. The search had become the life itself, the pursuit the only anchor to reality Anna could cling to. Then one night, something new happened. A small, faint thump on the floor in the hallway. She froze, breath caught in her throat. It sounded like a footstep, light, delicate, unmistakably human. Anna called softly, "Emma." The sound stopped. Silence. The apartment seemed to draw its breath with her, waiting. Another thump, closer this time. Anna tiptoed toward the sound, her body tense, heart hammering. The hallway remained empty. The shadows remained still. She began to understand a terrifying truth. Emma could appear and disappear without warning, leaving no trace for anyone but Anna to feel, to perceive, to chase. She had become both observer and prisoner of an impossible reality. Her daughter existed, yet had never existed. She was near, yet untouchable. And Anna, caught between hope and despair, could only follow the faintest hints, moving through a world that ignored the very existence of her child. Her mind, stretched to its limits, became a landscape of obsession and terror. She started speaking to herself in the third person, imagining Emma's responses, tracing invisible lines in the air as though marking a path. Each day brought new signs, new tiny impossibilities. Anna's life had narrowed to a single purpose: to find a child who vanished from the world, yet lingered in her perception, haunting her every waking moment. By the end of this second part, Anna was a shadow of herself. Her apartment was a meticulous record of Emma's fleeting presence. Her body was thin, her hair tangled, her eyes hollow with sleepless nights. She moved like a ghost through an ordinary world that refused to acknowledge the extraordinary events surrounding her. And always, at the edges of perception, the faintest giggle, The tiniest vibration, the whisper of vanilla, proof that Emma existed, yet proof that no one else could ever see her. Anna realized she was alone, truly alone. And yet, in the stillness of the apartment, she could feel Emma, always just beyond the edge of vision, teasing, taunting, impossible. The days blended together into a continuous haze. Anna no longer noticed the sun rising or setting. Time existed only as a measure of the small anomalies that marked Emma's presence. A shifted chair, a whispered giggle, a fleeting shadow. She moved through the apartment with deliberate care, her body tense, her mind alert to every imperceptible change. She had stopped trying to prove Emma's existence to anyone else. The world outside the apartment had no meaning, no relevance. Only the apartment, only the traces, only the impossibility of Emma mattered. One evening, Anna sat on the floor in Emma's room, her back against the bed. The air was thick with silence, yet she felt it vibrating, alive with a subtle energy she could not define. The doll lay in front of her, perfectly positioned, as if it had been waiting for her attention. She reached out, touched it, and immediately felt the familiar tug of presence, that ghostly tether she had chased for weeks. A soft, almost imperceptible laugh floated in the air. Anna whispered, "Emma, I'm here." Her voice cracked. "I'll find you. I always will." The laugh responded again, just on the edge of hearing, teasing, fleeting. Her heart raced. She stood and moved through the room, checking every corner, every shadow, every object. The apartment seemed to breathe with her movements. She could feel Emma everywhere and nowhere, a presence that was real and unreal all at once. Night after night, Anna performed the same rituals, arranging objects, leaving messages, speaking aloud, documenting every subtle sign. Her journals had grown into thick volumes, filled with frantic handwriting, sketches, diagrams, and repeated pleas. She no longer ate regularly, barely slept, existing solely to chase the impossible. The boundaries between reality and imagination had dissolved entirely. Then one night, a new sensation gripped her, a sudden, sharp certainty. Emma was here, in this moment. Anna's eyes scanned the room, and she saw it, or thought she did. A tiny movement in the corner of her vision. A shadow shifting slightly against the grain of logic. She stepped closer. The air seemed to pulse, charged with expectation. She called softly, "Emma?" The shadow solidified, taking form. For a moment, Anna saw her daughter clearly, the small face, the wide eyes, the familiar ribbon in her hair. Emma smiled at her. Anna's chest heaved with relief and joy. She reached out, trembling, wanting to touch her, to hold her, to finally confirm that the child she had chased through weeks of impossible reality was real. And then, Emma vanished. Not slowly, not suddenly, but utterly, seamlessly. The air returned to its stillness. The shadow collapsed. The room was empty. The doll lay undisturbed on the floor. Anna's hand hovered in the air, reaching for nothing. A soft giggle echoed once more. Teasing. Impossible. And Anna understood fully for the first time. Emma had never been there in any tangible sense. The presence, the scent, the shadows, the subtle movements, all of it was in her mind. She had created her daughter, conjured her from grief, obsession, and the fracturing of her own reality. Anna sank to the floor, the journals spilling around her. Her hands trembled as she realized the terrifying truth. There had never been an Emma. The invisible traces, the whispers, the giggles, the subtle signs, everything had been a product of her own mind. Her obsession, her desire, her guilt, had created a phantom so complete that it had consumed her life entirely. But even knowing this did not bring relief. Anna's heart still raced at the imagined sounds. Her eyes still flicked to the corners of the room. The apartment seemed to mock her, quiet and indifferent, holding only the ghosts of her obsession. The dolls and drawings, the tiny notes, the meticulous arrangements, all remained as if they were proof of a child who had never existed. Days turned into weeks, and Anna stopped distinguishing the present from the imagined past. She spoke to the empty apartment, leaving messages for a daughter who could never respond. Her body wasted, her mind unraveling. She became a permanent fixture of the empty apartment, a woman haunted by the perfect illusion she had created. One evening, she sat in the dark living room, clutching the last diary, the pages filled with desperate scrawls. A faint light from the city outside streaked across the walls. Anna whispered to the empty air, "Emma, I found you." The words sounded hollow even to her own ears. And then she smiled, a fragile, bittersweet smile, and realized that somehow the presence she had felt all along, the life, the love, the joy she had imagined, was still with her, entirely her own. And in that moment, she understood the final horror. She would never escape the child she had invented. The apartment, the whispers, the shadows, they would follow her, endlessly, inescapably. Emma had never existed, and yet she would haunt Anna forever. Anna's reflection in the mirror seemed different now. Her own face stared back at her, hollowed by obsession, eyes wide and unblinking. For a moment she thought she saw Emma standing behind her reflection, smiling. She reached out, and the reflection smiled back, but the girl was gone. Anna realized then that the entire world outside would never acknowledge Emma, and it did not matter. She had created the reality she lived in, and it was perfect in its impossibility. The final, terrifying truth settled into her bones. She was alone, yet she was never alone. Emma existed only because Anna needed her to exist, and that need was eternal. The disappearance had never occurred, but it would haunt her for the rest of her days. The impossibility of proof, the invisibility of her child to the outside world, the utter certainty of her presence to Anna alone, that was her life now. Anna sat in the dark, cradling the doll once more. She whispered Emma's name, and the faintest giggle returned. It was both comforting and maddening. The apartment pulsed with the rhythm of her obsession. She would never stop searching. She would never stop hoping. She would never stop hearing the child she had imagined, the daughter she had created. And in that silence, in that impossible, cruelly perfect illusion, Anna finally understood that reality had no power over the mind when the mind had already shaped its own. She was the mother of a child who had never existed, and that was enough. The night stretched on. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent. Inside, Anna and Emma, real only to one another, continued their endless, invisible dance. And the apartment held its secrets quietly, watching, patient, eternal.